Recording.
I'll call the North Smithfield School Committee of August 18th, 2020 to order. Clerk, please call a roll.
Chair Lombardi.
Present.
Mrs. Charest.
Here.
Mr. Connell.
Here.
Mrs. Johannes called. She wouldn't be here. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mrs. Mayo.
Here.
And Mrs. Vada.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming. Let's move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of
of
the
the
United States
of America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody want to take anything off the consent agenda or have any questions?
No, for me.
Okay. And if I don't see you, I apologize in advance, but I don't see any objections. So I will entertain a motion to pass the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
And seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to the superintendent's report. Superintendent, the reopening plan or the reopening / delay / plan or?
Well, as everyone knows, school opening has been delayed a couple of weeks, and we've notified everybody. We have some professional development lined up. I have to say, just off the top, I'm a bit disappointed because I wish we had been opening up at the regularly scheduled time. Yes, we can certainly always use a little extra time for preparations, but I feel that we've done quite a bit this summer and we would have been in a good shape to open up at the regular time. However, we will take advantage of this extra time that has been allotted us. What I have done is asked Mr. Seepy to be here to update everybody on the preparation of the facilities. And then afterwards, I've asked Mrs. Arnold to be here to give an update on our revised distance learning plans. And so if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Seepy, to give an update on the opening and certainly ask him any of the most difficult questions that you can. And he will be able to field any question easily. And I just want to say, he'll shortchange himself on the work that he's done, and I'm fully prepared to fill in all the things that he didn't mention. So, Mr. Seepy.
Okay, thank you. All of the custodians and the facility staff went through retraining for COVID cleaning procedures. We serviced all the unit ventilators, we changed the filters. Every ventilator in every classroom and every office is working. All of the windows are operable throughout the buildings. There are a few in the high school, which we're working on now. We purchased 150 gallons of hand sanitizer, 2,000 masks for children and for adults, 225 disinfectant spray bottles. It's going to be a spray bottle of disinfectant, paper towel, and hand sanitizer in every classroom. So teachers and students can clean up after themselves or use it as they may. And we have 25 cases of latex gloves, which comes out to about 25,000 pair of gloves. Signage, we just got the signage in today. We're going to be putting that throughout the buildings, one-way signs, upstairs, downstairs signs, wash your hands signs, all kinds of signage. That'll be going up in the next week or two. Before school opens, we'll be going through all of the classrooms, re-cleaning them, re-sanitizing them, re-disinfecting them. So when school opens up, everything is fresh, spanking new. At the elementary school, we've begun the HVAC control work. That'll be done. The mechanical part of it will be done by September 14th. The electronic part by the end of the month. But all of the unit ventilators there are working. The controls are more for the winter to control the heat, the even heat flow throughout the building. Tonight's agenda, there's a proposal to recommission the middle school. What that will do is go through the entire middle school, make sure all the ventilators and unit vents are working properly and have the even flow and readjust everything for the winter. The windows in the high school will be starting in a couple of weeks, and that should be done by the end of October. That's the first phase. That'll be on the first floor on the courtyard side. That'll give us about 75 windows that have been replaced, right around the 75, 80 windows. There's also a walking path in the middle of the elementary school, so Jen can breathe a little bit easier. Some kids can be walking on the outside of the building instead of the inside of the building to go to the gym and to the cafeteria. We've basically renovated the elementary school, took down walls, painted every classroom, replaced ceiling tiles, put all the LED lighting in there, put in new whiteboards, painted some tack boards, a whole bunch of other things. We put in some water bottle dispensing units at the elementary school, at the high school, and the middle school is next. They'll be in by September 2nd. Plexiglass shields in offices we put up at the main office areas. We renovated the high school kitchen, put in new ceiling tiles, painted it, tarred a pot, scrubbed it, cleaned it, really disinfected all the stainless steel there. The locker room is underway. That should be done by probably the end of September. And the girls' locker rooms will be painted, and that'll be done before school opens up. That's about it. Other than this general maintenance, we've been busy since March, and it'll show. If you go through the buildings, it'll show.
Alan, could we get a tour, school committee, and I don't know if it's,
Yeah.
we can set up something, maybe invite the media as well to take a look, and so we can communicate that out to everybody how great the schools look.
Yeah, whatever you want, sure.
Superintendent?
Absolutely. So I know I go through and I periodically take pictures of the work the maintenance staff is doing in the renovation. I put it up on Facebook, and it reaches typically between 2,000 and 3,000 people with a lot of comments and praise. But yes, absolutely, especially the work that's has been done at NSCS. And as Claire Arnold mentioned before, we started is that going through the classrooms, Mr. Sepe removed these concrete partitions that were in the rooms, and it's just opened everything up. And certainly with the new ceilings and the new lightings, it just feels open and airy, and it's just really nice looking.
That's great.
What I do want to say is that something that came up today is that with all of this COVID planning that we've been doing, honestly, I can admit some frustration because week to week, the guidance keeps changing as new situations develop or new science is in or new things are tested. And at the beginning of the summer, one of the recommendations was to put in little plexiglass dividers in all the classrooms between desks and everything. Mr. Sepe, we had some discussions about this, and his feeling was it's more important to work on the windows and the ventilation than, investing in all of these plexiglass dividers that will be used just a short period of time. And just this week, the new guidance came out. Don't waste your time or money on plexiglass dividers in classrooms. Focus on school ventilation. So because of, Mr. Sepe knowing his business, we did not waste a lot of time and money on fixtures that were short-term and not necessarily effective. And he invested his time, and we invested our funds into the important thing, and that's updating the ventilation system and the airflow within the buildings.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any questions?
I would just like to say, Alan, thank you very, very much. And wow, when you list all the things that have been accomplished, it's amazing. Thank you.
Well, you got to thank my staff. My staff did 90% of all of the work.
Well, please share with them our thanks.
They tore the walls down, they put ceiling tiles in, they painted, they put new tiles in, they did everything.
And again, just stressing how much we've saved financially in doing that work in-house, whereas at some point in the past, we may have had to contract out for this work. And the work that was done is just professional, top-notch, and everything looks great, and we're doing it on a fraction of the budget.
That's great.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just echo the chair's points that I would like to do a tour of the schools if we could before they open. And I think opening up to some other people, the press, would be great and transparent. I think it'd be a great thing to do. I know I'd like to see all three buildings if possible. And the only other thing, I'm just going to rant the same thing I always say. We're waiting for guidance. I think there should be more people from our branch at the table making decisions and not just waiting to hear. But I just always say at every meeting, I still maintain that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so distance learning, this is why I asked Mrs. Arnold here. Now, we did put out a survey to the parents, and it was a non-binding survey, and we understand that this is a snapshot in time, and the question was, do you intend to take a distance learning option and receive instruction at home as opposed to coming into the schools? Now, there was a lot of questions and confusion on this, and it was largely, how can we make a decision if we don't know what model of opening we're going to have? And fully admitted that, and just said, as best as you can, this is non-binding, but it does give us an opportunity to plan and to, what we need to put in place, how many students we need to serve. So we had 360 students whose parents indicated that they would prefer a distance learning option. Now, keep in mind, there's a caveat with this. Many folks either emailed me directly or put into the comments on the survey that depending on the model of reopening would change their response. Many people put that if we open do a full opening, they will prefer to distance learn rather than send their students in every day into a more crowded environment. If we were to open under the hybrid reopening, in which only 50% of the kids are in at any given time, and this swapping back and forth between in-person and distance learning, many parents indicated that they would choose the hybrid model. So what we will do once the model is decided, when the governor makes her announcement now on the 31st, when the district, the school committee, the community weighs in and we know which model, I will be putting out that survey again. So those parents who indicated that they want distance learning, it would give them an opportunity to remove their child's name from the list if they so choose. And those parents who didn't indicate that they would prefer distance learning would have an opportunity to indicate so. So there will be a second round on this, but for the time being, we're planning on the number of 360 students between K and 12. So Mrs. Arnold has been working this summer with a volunteer group of rockstar teachers, reassessing the distance learning from last year and putting together the structures that we will continue on with going into the new year. So Claire, if you want to share your screen, you can take over.
Sure. So really what I'm sharing is not necessarily just distance learning, it's just teaching and learning in North Smithfield and what we anticipate it looking like this year. So it's not focused on just like that distance portion of it. It is a work in progress. I do have, like you said, a rock star team. I know Mrs. Rathbun's on this call and she's been on the team, and we meet, frequently throughout the week in the mornings at 7:30 in the morning. We do our virtual meetings, and the number of hours that people have put in, I can't thank them enough. So I'm actually showing you a fraction of that because it would take, all day, all night to show you everything we've prepared. But a lot of what we're preparing is really for teachers for PD days prior to the start of the school year. So as we think about instruction going into this year, there's so many things that we have to keep in mind. And so as you may imagine, it's a challenge to plan and share our instructional programming as we don't know which model we're opening with. But we do know that we will be taking a remote first approach as to planning, and this will help us with distance learning, hybrid schedules, and socially distanced classrooms run more smoothly. And so we know some students, and it could be up to 20% of our students could be distance learning. We anticipate that the number of distance learning students will fluctuate throughout the year due to quarantining or illness. And that's not necessarily COVID. That could be staying home because you have a cough or a runny nose. Typically in the past, students would come to school with a runny nose, but that's going to be something that they can't come to school with. So students will be out quite a bit. If in person or hybrid, teacher schedules will have some students in school while other students learn remotely. And so students may transition back and forth between those two modalities. Our plan is to keep the distance learning model as fluid as possible. We don't want our teachers to try to plan two completely different in-person and online classes. Instead, think about goals for the class, and those goals should guide instruction across the environments, even if a teacher is using different techniques to achieve them online and in person. So our educational programming is based on standards, practices, and relationships, whether or not we're distance learning. That's always been the focus of our educational programming. And so we decided to, when we wanted to talk about the distance learning and learning in general and instruction this year, we broke it up into standards, practices, relationships, and technology. And so as we begin with standards, obviously a standard is what students are expected to know and be able to do at the end of the school year. Knowing full well this year will be unprecedented and unpredictable, we need to identify our most critical standards and teach them really intentionally, explicitly, and with a sense of urgency. So we've defined standards, and we've defined critical standards for English language arts. And those are standards that if a student doesn't master, it will greatly inhibit them in the future. And this doesn't mean that we won't teach some of the other standards or all of the other standards, of course, but it just emphasizes the ones that are critical. And we're going to really work with teachers on the critical standards. For math, same thing. We have certain critical standards for math. It's easy because the Common Core standards actually identifies the critical standards for us and the major content standards. And we're also going to focus on writing, especially at the elementary level. We know that that's an area that students lost out in the spring, because typing for a second grader is very different than writing multiple paragraphs. And so in order to fill learning gaps as a result of, distance learning last spring, we're going to be emphasizing writing across the curriculum. We're going to be supporting content classes. Supporting content classes will also provide a variety of opportunities to write and discuss their writing. And we're going to have a focus on writing in all classes this year. And it's going to be specifically aligned to our Anchor Standard 9. So when we think about, we start with the standards, and then we always go into the practices. And the practices really are the art and craft of teaching and the strategies that we use to address, again, some learning gaps that could have happened from last spring. And teachers, prior to teaching new content, will review with students any prerequisite skills and knowledge that they would need to know, or do some checks for understanding, and that will in turn inform the teacher and determine the student's needs and the student's entry points into the curriculum, and then plan the next steps from that. As I mentioned earlier, we are taking a remote first approach to instruction, and we'll be using a blended learning format. Blended learning is when we're using technology embedded into our instruction. So when we think of blended learning, there's synchronous and asynchronous, and it will be a mix of both. Asynchronous is, at the same time. So I could have my a class in a lesson where I'm doing it virtually and I'm presenting virtually, and that would be a synchronous lesson, or asynchronous where students have maybe been given the information, but then they would go and do the assignment on their own or at a different time. And then the different types of blended learning, we have stations, virtual rotation through stations, with at least one being online learning and being led by the teacher. We have an enriched virtual online learning with direct teacher instruction and support, an individual rotation. Students virtually rotate to stations on a scheduled playlist where they watch videos or do activities, or a flipped classroom. In the flipped classroom, students watch or listen to lectures on their own and then spend class time working on projects or activities with this teacher support. Another focus this year is relationships. As we implement our socially distanced classrooms, our distance learning, we really are emphasizing building student-teacher home relationships. Last year, you may remember, our teachers participated in a social emotional PD. We're going to continue some of this work throughout the year, focusing on developing relationships, and other topics will also be included in that PD topics, such as culturally responsive teaching and trauma-informed teaching practices. We're also going to fine tune our expectations for students and have creating a virtual social contract and what that entails, a quiet space, cameras on, no cell phones. And so we have possibly some type of contract that we're going to use with students, since we'll be using so much technology. And we're also thinking about doing a virtual background. And I think that even on this Zoom, we can all see into each other's houses, and that gets very distracting among students. And I think for some students, it could be uncomfortable depending on their environment. And so if we have common backgrounds for our students, that if it's actually a picture of a classroom, one of our classrooms, I think it gives that impression that we're in class and everyone kind of has that same background. So we've been talking about many ideas such as that. We also want to build our partnerships with families and really develop. We've definitely tried to, we already have consistently communicated with families, but we want to make sure that we're intentionally communicating and consistently communicating on a certain day or time that families can get used to seeing our updates, having tutorials and cheat sheets available for parents whenever they're ready to dive into something like I really want to learn about this platform my child's using, and there might be a tutorial that they can look at, or even have a parent academy or a distance learning boot camp for parents where the classroom teacher could have a Zoom meeting such as this, or have a Google Meets and work with just the parents that are doing distance learning, really talking about the platforms that we're using, the standards that we're teaching, and all that in good information. And then we've really dug into the technology, and we want to really focus and pinpoint the technology that we're using. Last year, obviously, it was really on a dime that we transitioned to distance learning. And so we want to, and there were many platforms that were available for free that now actually have a price to them. But because of that, our teachers used all different types of platforms. And I think it was really creative and it was wonderful and everyone was amazing. But it also created confusion for the user, because every teacher, if they have multiple teachers, was using maybe a different platform. And I think that was a lot of stress. It could have been stress on either, it could have been stress on students or just on families in general. And so we want to streamline that a bit. And so we're going to continue to, when we do update curriculum and programs, take technology into account, which we have in our newest programs really do have the latest technology, and we want to make sure that we're using that technology and everything that is embedded within the program. And so we have ReadyGen at the elementary school, and that has all the technology that we would need within our reading program. And we have Go Math and My Math for our math programs, but we definitely struggled with the technology embedded within the program, and those programs are a little bit older. So our teachers chose, some teachers chose to use Zern Math, and I think that we're going to do PD and have all teachers use that as a supporting platform to the math instruction. At the middle school, we have ReadyGen, we have My Perspectives and Envisions, and at the high school, we're going to be adopting StudySync, which is a new language arts program that we actually wrote a grant for, and we, we're funded for that full program. And so that has, top of the line technology, and we also have Envisions Math at the high school. But then we have also supporting platforms, and those are the extra. I want students to use for practice or for other things. So we have IXL, and we're doing that K-12. Now, families, and you may be familiar with it, and that's typically been math, but they also have English, language arts, science, and social studies. So we've expanded our license to add to those. We have Gizmos, which is science technology that we've had in the past. And so that's not new, but we'll still be using our Gizmos. So students in middle school and high school can do like simulations of labs at home using Gizmos. Screencastify, Edgenuity, Newsela, RAS Kids at the elementary, in the Zern Math, which I had mentioned a little bit earlier. And so we're trying to definitely fine tune our platforms. We have a couple more that we're just looking at, but pretty much this would be the platforms that we're using and engaging in. For parents and students, we're going to create resources of how-to videos, slides to orient and support parents and students with distance learning applications, grade level and department specific videos and slides for the beginning of year setup. And we have our teachers are going to be able to participate in professional development. And that is going to be given from either outside vendors, but also administrators, department heads, team leaders, grade level leaders, technology department will train staff at the beginning of the year. And we do have a few extra days now, so we're going to have the time to really dig into our tools and be consistent with our tools. And go from there. And so that's the general picture of what we're doing and how we're doing it. One of the questions I'm going to bring up, because if I don't, I know someone will, is why aren't we having a dedicated, is this okay, Mike, that I'll go into the—
Go ahead.
Why aren't we having a dedicated distance learning teacher? And we definitely thought about that, and we considered that, and we didn't know what our numbers would be, and if we would have 75% of our students wanted to do distance learning, or 50%. But because of our numbers, we're finding that in some grade levels, we don't have enough students to do a full class. And also and it was a process. And so it was many discussions and many meetings over and many hours. But we found that for a few reasons, but one was if we did decide to do a distance learning teacher, then that would increase the class size for every other class that is in person. And that would make socially distancing classrooms, so incredibly difficult, because we could have 24 students in one second grade class and then 0 students present in a distance learning class. The other thing is we want it to be fluid. And so if I was this teacher with the 24 students in the distance learning in the in-person class, well, maybe 5 of my students are out because they're sick or they have to be quarantined or anything that seems like it's going to come up. Well, they wouldn't if the other distance learning class is already full, now that teacher is balancing both. And so we felt like if we spread it out amongst everyone, that everyone is going to go on the same page with distance learning, and that I say distance learning, but blended learning, in distance learning, but also in-person learning, where we're using a blended approach. And that will really help us transition, because we're assuming at some point this year, we're probably going to be put on distance learning, that the whole district at some point, if our COVID numbers go up. And if we do it this way, we're really preparing our teachers and our students as best we can for, if we go out, we'll be able to transition so easily, because I'm a teacher and I've been using a station rotation guided blended learning model within my classroom for the students that are in front of me. And even when they're in front of me, maybe I'm taking a group, well, they can't huddle near me anymore. We all have to be spread apart. So I could actually have students working, but take a group of students, but it could be a Google Meet, even though we're in the same classroom. And some of our students that are home can be part of that Google Meet. And so we want our students that are at home to actually feel part of that very classroom, to see their peers and work with their peers and do projects with them online. So we've definitely had a lot of conversations. Did I sum that up okay, Mr. St. Jean?
Absolutely.
There's a lot
Yes.
of questions, and it's hard. There is no perfect answer, but that hopefully explains it a little bit. And I'm just going to thank one more time, because I'm only showing you a fraction of some of the work that we did, and that we're still doing. And we're still, we're meeting tomorrow morning at 7:30 to continue to work on this, to say that our next step is, now that we have like the framework, is that what do the schedules look like? What does this look like in a 2nd grade classroom versus a 7th grade classroom versus a 12th grade classroom? And we have the best of the best teachers on the team that are just figuring it out and coming to the table with ideas. And so that's where we are with it.
Great. Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chair, I do. Mrs. Arnold, I recently saw some information that kind of keyed in toward the kids and had them really think about, and their parents really think about, the environment they're in when they're doing their distance learning. Not being on a bed, not being on a couch, sitting on a chair, sitting up straight, having something behind them. Are we sending that information out to parents?
So that's part of the social contract that we're building. Okay. And that virtual social contract that we're building is really setting the expectations and sharing that with families, but also sharing it with students. And I think that if we're doing things like a Zoom meeting within the classroom, the students are right over there, but I'm doing a Zoom meeting, that we can actually prepare them really well for when, or if or when they go on distance learning, because we're right here and be like, hey, sit up. This is what the expectation is. And, but yes, we're absolutely going to fine tune. I think we did a really nice job last year and worked really hard, but we just want to fine tune, extend and refine what we did. And so part of that is having really clear expectations, not only for students, but clear expectations for teachers. What does my day look like on a distance learning, if I'm full-time distance learning, a distance learning instructor? How can I do a guided reading group? I'm an elementary teacher on distance learning. Well, we have teachers right now over the summer that are working on making videos showing examples of this is what a guided reading group would look like virtually. And so we're like just fine-tuning that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one. And maybe this is more better for the superintendent, but Claire can comment on this. One of the things I was wondering was, let's say we don't go virtual for a while. Let's say that we're blended for a while and we also have a virtual group. Is there any thought about doing things like with other districts? In other words, getting a group of teachers, maybe from the 3 districts, say Burrillville, Smithfield. I mean, we could say whatever districts you want, and sort of have our own like you said, there may not be enough numbers to justify doing that just in our own district, but if we paired up with some other districts, would it make sense to have like almost like a regional virtual academy where, again, kids with 4 or 5 groups are there, and you have a couple of teachers from each district kind of together as a group. And the idea would be that, I don't know, is there any thought about, I may have ideas, but is there any thought about kind of working with other districts to have this? Again,
We did, going into the summer or towards the end of last year, we did meet with our 4 other partner districts, Smithfield, Lincoln, Cumberland, and Burrillville, to discuss exactly that. But here's what happened along the way. We had a lot of changing information came out and a lot of adjustments, multiple plans, and we all got so involved in just keeping our own districts moving forward that a lot of those deeper conversations and planning between multiple districts just didn't happen. And we have met, we have a number of things planned with our neighboring districts, but not combining a virtual academy. But yes, it was on the table, but the reality of the situation is this has been such a heavy lift to propose and create all these plans that may or may not happen.
You left a bag of garbage?
Oh, thank you. So, but yes, that was on the table. However, we do have other things that we're working on collaboratively to roll out.
Oh, and one other question. In terms of, this maybe go back to what we talked about earlier, but I know we don't know all the students who are going virtually yet, and then that number may shift. How do those projections work into our busing situation?
I'm going to cover that in just a moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, great questions. All right, any other questions for Mrs. Arnold? No, I want to thank you so much in the work that the teachers have done on this. And again, I had said this in the past that with all the planning that we had to do, my least concern was the curriculum and the instruction. And it's not because I'm not concerned about curriculum and instruction. I just know that Claire and the teachers have that so well in hand. And so, and you just saw a piece of this. So very happy with what everybody has put together. What I'd like to do is to continue that can-do attitude that you just heard from Mr. Seepy and Mrs. Arnold, but unfortunately, I'm going to now make your head spin and probably a couple of recommendations along the way, because I want to get into some of the weeds in the juggling act that's also happening. One, the budget. We are only allotted $218,000 for COVID-related expenses. We're already exceeding that. So we have other things that have been recommended to us by the Department of Ed that at this stage, there is no way, shape, and form that we can possibly afford this. So for example, Mr. Cannell mentioned busing. One of the documents that came out from the Department of Ed and the Department of Health is that we will be limited to 36 students on a bus. That's a hard number, okay? So now with our 20% who are doing distance learning, that helps. And I have to go through and run the numbers again. However, we are going to have difficulty with transportation at the limit of 36 students on a bus. One of the recommendations in the guidance that was sent out to us was, yeah, it's no problem. Just here's the math. If you have 2 bus runs, if you add a 3rd run, here's how many more students you can carry. If you have 3 runs, and you add a 4th run, here's how many more students you can carry. Yeah, we get the numbers on how many more students we can transport on a bus, but each of those buses, the extra runs cost $80,000 or so. So in order to go from 2 bus runs to 3, we'd have to come up with about $600,000, which again, we're not budgeted for. So from the transportation portion, we are going to be somewhat restricted in our ability to get students from home to school and from school to home. If we do a full reopening. And again, that is the goal. Did everyone go back to school 5 days a week? You know, just get back to the way it was used to be. However, with a limit of 36 students on a bus, that becomes problematic. Number two, let me go back to the budget. We are probably not going to have an indication of state aid to education to sometime in mid-September at the earliest. So there was hope that the federal government would come up with a stimulus package, a plan for aid to municipalities and states. That didn't happen. Everybody went on break. They'll resume back in September. The hope is that a package will come up because, again, Rhode Island alone has to make up $800 million in lost revenue due to COVID-related expenses. How that translates to the school and state aid to education, which is approximately 1/5 of our budget, we don't know. Fortunately, and you know, I give the town credit, they did put aside funds in case we were hit very hard on state aid to education. We can make up some of it. However, it's not making up. It's basically a break even, keep afloat proposition, not a add more buses, add more custodians. There's a recommendation to add more bus monitors to the buses. Again, we're not budgeted for any of that, nor is the set aside fund from the town. So, you know, we have to try to keep things safe and also within a budget. I am very, very concerned about staffing. You know, Ms. Arnold talked about, you know, we're preparing for students who may have to come in and out of distance learning due to COVID-related quarantine. That holds true for teachers. We have a hard time getting substitute teachers even under the best of circumstances, let alone in the middle of a pandemic. I understand when, and I'll say, and believe me, this is no criticism to the governor, but these are some of the connections I make when I hear public people make statements regarding the opening of schools. Everybody wants schools to open. They want the full opening remodel, you know, the model, you know, based on infections per 1,000, based on the, you know, how rapid testing is. You know, we want schools to reopen. Yet, in the same presentation, in the same breath, it's the message is that, look, if you have sniffles, you don't go to school. You know, and that's the message for students. If you have a headache, if you have a sniffles, don't go to school. We cannot keep going with the perfect attendance, you know, protocol that we used to uphold. Well, this holds true for employees as well. So for our teachers to be told, you know, if you have a headache or if you have a sniffle, you don't go to work. You know, that's the message to, you know, all of the commercial and the, you know, the other businesses out there. That's all problematic for teaching in that if our teacher wakes up with the aches or sniffles or something like that, usually we just push through because, you know what, honestly, working with kids, we're used to being sick all the time. All right. Now, unfortunately, we don't know what kind of sick we have. And the message is, don't go to work. We have classrooms to fill. We have, you know, adults to put in front of children. And I am concerned that whether a teacher goes into quarantine or we follow the messaging that if you're sick, don't go to work, we're going to have difficulties filling classes. I already anticipate difficulties with substitutes, getting enough subs to cover. Now, one of the things that we haven't added to our plan that is a consideration, and I'm you know, we've been talking about it internally. You know, this is the first public discussion of this, and I really want to bring this up as a real discussion. So, we're looking at the possibility of shortening the school day by 45 minutes. Now, North Smithfield, our school day is actually much longer than what is required by the Department of Education. Our school day is longer than pretty much every district within every public school in the state. Our school day more rivals a private or parochial school day. If we were to shorten the day by 45 minutes, we fall within the time allotment that pretty much every school district follows. We hesitate on doing this because, one, our kids benefit from the extra instruction. We do not want to shift parents around in their schedules. We do want our schools to open. We want to keep it consistent. But one of the possibilities in reducing the school day by 45 minutes is to add a flex period at the end of the day. Now, our teachers by contract, they need to have a planning period, a prep period every day. That is non-negotiable. A teacher, you know, with all the different classes he or she is teaching, needs a block of time during the day for planning and for preparation. Now, at the secondary schools, there's an additional period that was created a long time ago. It's called a duty period, in which most of our teachers use that time to meet with students. They have different duties during the day. Often it's meeting with small groups of students and doing personalized instruction. At the high school, the duty period has become a student academic assistance period. So our teachers, under the word duty, it's not free time. However, what duty has also been used to do is to cover classes where a substitute was not available. And that has helped our middle school and our high school immensely with this ongoing shortage of substitute teachers. Other districts, what they've done is that if there is not a substitute to cover a class, they break up that class into small groups and divide it amongst other classes. We don't do that in North Smithfield. We keep the class together. We keep instruction consistent. We don't divide kids up to babysit. That's why at the secondaries, at least, we have that duty period so that a teacher they know can come in and cover a class and continue instruction. In the COVID world, where we're concerned about teachers who are going to go, who may be quarantined or who may be sick and not come to school, that block at the end of the day can serve as that standing preparation period, that prep period, that contractual prep period. So we technically have, again, this is at the high school, middle school, 2 periods during the day. Our own teachers can cover a class if we're short of staff and we don't have substitutes. That's if things go sideways, if things go bad, we have a built-in ability to cover classes. If we do have a day in which we're not have to, scramble to cover, that block of time, that flex block, a flex plan at the end, can also be used for distance learning, can be used for things that Mrs. Arnold said, to be recording videos for the next day, to be working with small groups of kids, either in an after-school environment or in a remote environment. So this is just something we're putting on the table as a potential solution to what I truly anticipate as going to be a shortage of staff. We also have, from the staffing standpoint, a lot of our teachers are older. We have a number of our teachers have medical, are compromised medically, have pre-existing conditions. And right now, some of them are wrestling, because they want to come back to work. They love their jobs. We did offer a retirement incentive. At this stage, nobody has applied. We have some folks that are eligible to retire, but they love their work, and so they're struggling. They're wrestling with coming to work, knowing that they're in a high-risk situation. I have right now about a dozen employees who have approached, and they may have potential medical issues that complicate them coming back to the classroom, to come back to work with the students. So we're looking at you know, we're working with the unions, we're working with our staff, and we're just trying to find ways around it. Or what we can do is reasonable accommodation so that people feel safe coming to work, even if they have, you know, a pre-existing condition or a medical complication. Because here's the flip side. We're essential workers in school. You know, our job is to be in school, is to work with the kids. However, we also have some teachers that and other staff that they're late 60s, early 60s, late 60s. They have diabetes, they have heart conditions, they have other things that complicate that decision about coming back to work. So we may have a potential shortage of teachers as we try to fill the classrooms. Now, we don't know what the governor is going to recommend as far as reopening. We know that under a couple of different models, if you're looking at cases in, cases per 1,000, North Smithfield has a low COVID rate. If you're looking at the ability for the state to deliver on a 48 to 72 hour testing turnaround, they could possibly meet that benchmark. Our facilities are ready, our curriculum is ready, our teachers are ready. However, we have transportation issues. We have potentially staffing classrooms. What I would be recommending, regardless of what the decision is to open, is to step in slowly. At least for the first few weeks, first couple of weeks, first 3 weeks, I would like to do, at this stage in time, again, things could change, reopen with the hybrid model, K-12, where the students are coming in 2 days a week in person, in small groups, just so we can get used to the new processes, the new protocols, the new moving of students. Because here's my other concern. If we do a full reopening, again, I'd prefer to do a soft launch and get everything right, as opposed to just flooding the schools with all these kids with new protocols and new procedures and new ways of teaching, than to do it in stages and do it so that we do it right, so that we assess the situation and we can continue to expand as the situation merits. Because here's the other piece. If we're in our classrooms, and say if you remove the 20% who does distance learning, our average class size will still be 20 to 23, 24 students if we remove those who are on distance learning. There's still substantial sizes. We cannot social distance within those rooms. The desk will be set 3 feet apart. And if you go through the guidance from the Department of Ed, the protocol is straight rows, faced forward, no conversation, masks on. We'll reopen. We will pack the kids in the classroom. We will have them sit at the desk, no interaction, facing forward, maybe working on their computers while they're in person, versus, again, I go back to the hybrid approach. We can lower the class sizes, we can transport everybody, we can feed everybody. We met with Chartwells today, and we're just trying to figure out, if we can't all be in the cafeteria, how do we get food to kids in a timely fashion? How do we serve breakfast? If we at least reopen under the hybrid model, we can get, the kids can come in, the desk can be 6 feet, 8 feet apart. We can social distance in the classroom. We can be more social. We can get kids to lunch and back. We can serve breakfast. We can transport kids on the bus. All I'm saying is that I don't know what the future will bring. As Mrs. Arnold said, honestly, I hope I'm wrong. I think we're going to be back in a distance learning environment. You know, I hope our schools don't become super spreaders. I hope we can just do this safely, methodically, and with the goal of being in person the whole time. But I'm not necessarily recommend that on day one, we all come back. We scramble for parents to drive their kids and drop them off. We arrange carpools. We scramble on how we're going to feed kids. And then we have the kids coming into buildings. We're working on ventilation. The windows will be open, but you know what? Sometimes it's still pretty hot. And, I don't want the start of school to be a prison. I would like it to be social. I'd like them to connect with their teachers. I'd like everyone to feel safe. So I'm just going on record making this recommendation to project out what things could be in a few weeks when it comes time to reopen. And believe me, I feel and understand the parents, and what I don't want to do is like some districts that have come right out and voted, we're starting day one distance learning. I don't believe we need to be distance learning. I don't want to relegate any grade levels to full distance learning. I'd rather have the kids in front of us a couple of days a week and build the relationships and make those connections than just stick everyone on a computer at home, no matter how rigorous or how newly structured our system will be. We need to have those connections. So I'm sorry I didn't continue the can-do attitude that we just heard.
Mr. Chair, I have a question, or if that's appropriate. Is now appropriate?
Yes.
Okay. Couple of things. Superintendent, just want to ask, in your model, the hybrid model, if you will, or the whatever model you want to do it, would it be all the kids on those 2 days, or half the kids on one day, half the kids on the other day? Half and half, right? Or
half and half.
Half and half.
Yeah, so while half is in, the other
Yeah.
half is on distance learning, which, as we said in our model, we're connecting the distance learning kids to the classroom kids as much as we can.
My second question was, I mean, I've been worried about the busing for a long time, but you talked about a third run. Just for the sake of argument, if we managed to get a grant somewhere to get an extra 80,000, okay, if we had the money and we had the third run, wouldn't we have a problem though with, or how would we address the idea of kids coming into the school and multiple waves? Would that be?
What we would have to do if we added a third bus run, which would be actually about $500,000 to $600,000, assuming our transportation provider could do that.
Right.
We would have to put each school on its own schedule. So elementary would be, high school would be on one run, middle school on another, elementary on another. So we would be changing the start and stop times for all three schools. We would have to start the high school earlier in order to fit everything into the day.
And this last thing is just a comment, because again, I think we all appreciate that it's a fluid situation. It's very hard. I still think that doing some sort of a collective, or partnering with some of the people doing some type of a virtual learning academy where would help with some of these things, in the sense that because I think having to have our teachers do both, be responsible for the virtual and in class is going to be very trying. And just from what you were saying, this just occurred to me as you're saying, if we had a virtual learning group, then if we had a situation where, say a teacher was out and I'm going to my French class or I'm going to my science class, we could have somebody watching the kids during that period, and maybe I'm trying to think of the spaces where we'd have it, but some of those kids could be watching their virtual French class, and some other kids could be watching their virtual science class, and some kids could be watching the virtual math class during that same period. And all we'd have to have is maybe one person, a duty person, to watch those three groups. I understand spreading out's a problem. I'm not minimizing that, but I think, guys, I'm just throwing that out there.
No, and that's actually part of our model, because one of the things that I've discussed with the union leadership, and I'll use Amy Wright as an example. So suppose Ms. Wright is told that she has to quarantine.
Mhm.
All right. So on one level, there's a possibility that all of her classes that she's come in contact with every kid that she comes in contact with will have to quarantine. If that's not the case, say if she has to quarantine because somebody in her household has COVID, and she has to quarantine out of a abundance of caution, out of precaution. Part of having that extra duty period, that extra flex period for the teachers would allow a teacher to be able to cover 2 classes. So in her case, if she's not physically sick, she could teach the class from home to the kids who are in person. However, we still need an adult in the room.
Yeah.
That's where one of our teachers would go from a duty period or from the daily planning period and sit in the room to supervise the kids, possibly assist, and even use that time as additional planning, because you're right, there is going to be a heavy lift as we try to incorporate all kids at home or in school. So yes, that's the piece that we're factoring into, having this happen.
Okay.
So just to follow up very quickly on that. So Superintendent, that's where I was going to ask you, do we have the capability, if a teacher wakes up with a sore throat, not COVID related, but again, wants to be careful, not come in, that they can broadcast to they can still teach, they just can't come in, but they can broadcast to the students who are there?
Technically, yes, that does exist.
That's great.
Obviously, if the person is sick, and again, because here's the other thing, is that under the CARES Act, everybody has time that they have COVID related time. So they can take 2 weeks out, if they're under quarantine. So, but we've been talking about that, look, if you're under quarantine and you're sick, yes, absolutely. However, if you're under quarantine for, out of precaution, you don't have to dip into your 2 weeks. You can still teach from home, assuming we can have coverage for that class. And again, if it gets to the point where it becomes debilitating and we can't even do that, then we're going to have to come up with other models. Ideally, we could have enough subs to do the coverage. The other thing that we also have to factor in is that, again, under the law, if I'm a teacher or anybody, you can take time out of work if your children are on distance learning and you don't have daycare for them. And that can go up to 10 weeks. So let me give you an example. There's a community right next to me. I'm on the border of this community. I live in Cranston. It's on my border. They took a vote to start the year with distance learning. We have a teacher at the high school, lives in that community, right over on the border, right across the border, with 5 children at home. Under COVID, under the CARES Act, he is entitled to take up to 10 weeks out to provide care for his children.
Paid?
No, it starts out paid and then it starts sliding. All right, Lisa can go through the details of this, but yes, so there are things that are built in, and again, it's just not teachers, it's there for every employee, anybody who has a job in the state, and the governor has, made it very clear that this is your right, this is the law, you can take advantage of this. However, that may be fine if I have a desk job and I'm just kind of working on, a cog in a bigger wheel. But when I have to be in front of children all day long, it becomes problematic, especially if we don't have coverage. Now, one of the reasons why there are districts out there, they're looking at the staffing issues. I was on a meeting today with superintendents, and there was one district in particular, a bit larger than us, not necessarily that large. They have about 40 employees who may not be coming back. Okay, so there is going to be a staffing shortage. And I'm just telling you, giving you the heads up. Our teachers want to come back. We have enough with medical issues, and we have enough that may have childcare issues. And again, our parents have the same thing. We get it. We're essential employees. If we're looking at doing a hybrid thing, that puts our families in a compromised position to arrange care, just like our teachers. But again, there are laws in place that gives everybody options. And I'm just concerned, not that people are going to take advantage of it, but that they may need to use it. So again, I'm just being very transparent, putting it out there as that these are the kind of concerns that circle through my head late at night as I'm trying to connect all these dots on what a reopening is going to look like. That causes me some issues. And again, I've met with, started meeting with some of the teachers that have put out medical concerns. We've met with the union leadership. We're going to try to make accommodations. We're going to try to make everybody feel safe. We're going to try to keep the buildings open. And I hope we can. Again, I don't know what turn, I can't project what turn the virus is going to take in the state. What I can say at this stage, though, I think we would all feel more comfortable if we do a soft staged staggered opening as opposed to full reopening right immediately, regardless of what comes down from the state. But what I would also say, I'm just going on record, I would say that what we should do is set up an emergency special school committee meeting to take place after the 31st, after we hear the announcement, after we get more information, and then let's just hammer it out there and let's just draw the line in the sand and just do it.
I agree. And if anybody else wants to speak, I just want to make some statements. Does anybody else want to go first? So Superintendent, I'm going to give you obviously my personal beliefs, which may differ from the school committee, but I just wanted to put them on record as well.
Absolutely.
So I think that the extra period is ingenious, and I think that seems to be a very good long-term. Hey, listen, if everything breaks down, we got a plan. So I think that's very smart. I think that that ultimately, we will obviously support your decisions. We appreciate you, the administrators, the teachers, and everyone for how hard they're working. On busing, I think I would ask that this is something that I think the school committee can help you with. I have no problem I would not believe, would not support like a lottery system. I know that that's been not in our district, but in other districts. I would not support something like that, right. But I would absolutely support going out to parents and asking them. There are obviously some people who must bus. There's no question that they have to bus. There are other people that it could be voluntary. Maybe the parent can bus. You can't say, it's easier to bus, let them bus, but I can bring them. So we can make personal appeals to those people as school committee members to say, listen, we need your help here. I think that this community will band together and help.
I agree, they will.
So I hope that the busing issue can be solved without, putting us in bankruptcy, to be honest. I mean, $600,000 causing a massive shortfall in the budget. I think we spoke many times about, I know that, again, if you believe that we need a delayed opening or the opening, soft opening, I'm supportive of that, but I also just want to put on record, I know that it's very important, in my opinion, for students to have interaction. I think working from home, there's anxiety. If parents can't work, there's going to be a loss of revenue. And what that's going to translate to down the road is foreclosures, people getting thrown out of their houses. I would assume that in certain circumstances, the basic needs are not going to be met. And so I'm just very concerned about the ability for parents to work. Understanding that it's a choice. You can not send them to school if you don't feel that it's appropriate, and only if it's safe. You know, I'm just concerned about giving the parents the opportunity to be able to work. I think is the one thing, if we can do it safely. And I just wanted to make sure that I went on record to say that. But ultimately, it's in my opinion, it's your call, Superintendent. We support you. We hired you. I think that we have full support of this board, and we trust you. So you're going to do what's right. I just wanted to put on record just my feelings.
And I appreciate that. And the goal would be, again, this is a snapshot in time, the soft opening, get our processes and procedures in place, get everybody used to it. And then as we expand, if we're able to add more days, the priority is the elementaries, K through 5. They have to be in every day. You know, that would be the goal. I'm just hoping that we can do this in a way that does not compromise, you know, the health and safety of the elementary schools and the teachers and the kids. We are looking at carving up outdoor spaces. Jen Dano is on board. She has some fantastic ideas. We've met with the folks at Camp Phoenix. We're looking at utilizing tents and outdoor spaces, but that only carries us so far into the season. And unfortunately, with the delayed opening, we've lost some of the outdoor time, you know, that we could have started school and been outside and engaging in learning. The other thing would be some of the our most high need special education students. You know, I wouldn't necessarily want, there are students who, you know, if we do a hybrid thing, if that's what we end up with long term or whatever, I don't necessarily want our, you know, our most high need special education students to be on a hybrid schedule. I would like to get them in every day. Likewise, and again, but I'm not too sure about Monday. We still have in our plans that sort of Monday distant learning day. That's still in place. Again, once we get the full reopening and all the full picture, we'll go through the exact models and we'll do that line in the sand. And I would also say, and this is part of some of our discussions, that even if things go south, even if we end up on distance learning, I still want to keep the schools open. I would still, and again, I've had conversations with the union. Let's do distance learning from the classroom to the home. Let at least, you know, as many of our teachers come in that can. And even make the exception for, again, our most needy special ed students. Or just to give ourselves the flexibility, no matter how bad it gets, that we just don't shut down, work from home, that we keep our schools open and we know more about the COVID, about transmission, about safety than we did back at, you know, last year when everybody went into lockdown. Unless we go into lockdown and we're ordered to be home, I want to keep our schools open in any way, shape, or form, you know, and meet as many needs of students as is safe and we're allowed to. So.
And Superintendent, I know the other thing that goes along with that is that I mentioned, is it possible, again, you know, the governor can shut us down for the year. I get that, and that may happen. But if we can do it safely, to have some type of, I'm going to say study hall, where parents, even if you're on your off day, parents can bring the children so that they can work and they can distance learn from inside of our schools, so they're protected. You know, ideas like that is things that, you know, if you can think about, the administrators can think about, I'm very concerned in that area, obviously, as you know. Again, we have to be able to do it safely.
Right.
But if there is a safe way of doing it, I would like to at least take a look at that option and bring it to the school committee. I don't know, again, if anybody agrees with that or doesn't, but you know, I think there needs to be an opening of schools when we can say that we can do it safely.
Well, you also, you prompted I write my to-dos in a red pen, and I've had this in my red pen, which is now several pages back because I keep adding more stuff, one of the options is to, on my list is to talk with Kids Club. I mean, we still want to run Kids Club after school. I don't know if they're equipped to do a Monday, service. Again, I don't know if out there in the community, there's any interest in putting something together. Say, I brought this up at the public meeting, to use, if it's possible to use Wide World of Sports. Huge facility. Is there something that could be set up over there? And again, unfortunately, it's something that I'm sure, unless there's a volunteer group or there'd be some payment that would be necessary. But again, to give folks options. I wish we had a YMCA in our community, because they in their communities, they can run programs like that. And I know when I was in Pawtucket, I used to do a lot of work with the YMCA that ran after school homework clubs. And so they were connected to our schools, and they just worked with the kids. We had them during the day, they had them after school. I wish we had more of that type of resource within our community.
We have the library, which is small, but it's a resource.
Can we use our emergency powers to eminent domain the building at Hallowell?
I don't want to say this, but Hallowell, the last year was open. We had storms, and the three main buildings lost power all the time, but Hallowell kept going. Hallowell is the best campus for COVID. It is the perfect pandemic school. I don't want to rub it into anybody, but my goodness, if we still had that building, if that was still in that would be our best building to return to school in. Just saying.
Well, are we serious about this? I mean, I'm sure we could go to the council and talk to them about other buildings. What condition are the buildings in? How much revamp would they need? Probably a lot.
Oh no, no.
I'm only talking about the cafeteria too.
Yeah, that one building, the main building. Yeah, that might work just as a space.
I'm watching Ms. Dano frantically shake her head back and forth. That's a big no, Bill.
Be creative.
I don't know if you've taken a walk by there. Unfortunately, it's definitely not anywhere near ready for kids.
I actually did go by there the other night, but I was on the outside. I didn't know what it looks like inside, Just needs a good mowing around the grass and everything.
So we'll, obviously as new information comes out, we'll keep informing you that, the entire community. Ms. Arnold's slide deck that you put together, once we get that finalized, that will be published. I should point out that I updated on our website the new FAQ from the Department of Ed that has additional guidance. I will post. I did mention the transportation guidance, but there's a new document on that really outlines what transportation is supposed to look like. I did send it over to Mr. Mayo, our transportation coordinator. There's a lot of caveats and a lot of steps that we need to make when it comes to the transportation, the opening of school. And again, I have complete faith in our teachers and our ability to reach students and provide good instruction. My concern comes into these logistics, the transportation, the social distancing, the flow of the buildings, the staffing, the seamlessly moving in and out of quarantine. And that's the other thing parents should realize. Even if we do a full reopening and we're back, we could in an instant, in a day, have an entire classroom of kids or a grade level have to go home because of something happened on the bus or in a cafeteria or in a classroom. And in that stable pod, that group has to be home. So, there's no guarantee. And so I would just caution even the parents, even if we're able to fully reopen, keep your options open. And let's try to get some sort of community supports, that we can help each other out with.
I have one question. I know it's late, but about the transportation, if I may, Chair.
Yeah.
If we have, let's say you've got 5 kids in a class and we're trying to keep a cohort together and they live in one part of town or near each other in one part of town, can the parents form, or the parents or the guardians form their own, like a mini car pool whereby maybe, let's say I'm involved in it. Maybe I can take the kids to school in a van, 5 kids, 2 days a week. Somebody else can pick the kids up 2 days a week. I mean, can we do that as keeping the pod together if like a group of parents want to do that? And that's, can we do that? Can they do that?
Absolutely, because, and one of the things that even with the carpooling, the ride sharing, the Department of Ed, the Department of Health will be trying to reinforce the keeping groups consistent. And just like as the students go onto a bus, they're going to have assigned seating, so that if a student sitting in front or behind is, test positive, the CDC, the Department of Health will do contact tracing, and quite possibly the students in front and behind will have to go on quarantine. Likewise, if a student doesn't take one of the buses, and would need to know who they get the ride share with, because those students could possibly then end up on quarantine. So there's a great big domino ripple effect, but the main message is to try to maintain the social distance, keep the masks on, and keep the groupings as consistent as we can.
Do the same restrictions on the buses apply to a private, like if they were doing a carpool van? Like, would you have to have the same spacing in a van as opposed to, say, on the bus?
No, because again, there's guidelines that we have to follow more so than an individual person.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I would just add one thing. What we would hate to see is that, and this is going to sound crass, but we don't want, we're taking great care to try to keep kids grouped and separate. We have, certainly Jen and Rachel have put together, and all of our principals actually, new drop-off and pickup, so that we're not all clustering in the same places, that certain grade levels get dropped off or picked up at certain doors, and we're keeping it separate. What we would hate to have after taking all of these precautions is to have kids crowd into a minivan, clown car style, without mask, and then the doors open and these little disease vectors all then spread out throughout the building. So we're hoping that, we have the same level of caution with the, those who are doing ride shares or carpooling as best as we can.
Thank you, Superintendent. And as always, when you're ready for a meeting, we'll call it, and we're ready to make whatever decisions we need to make. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, too, and Mississippi, Alan as well.
All right, so the next piece, I just want to acknowledge the passing of Thomas Devine. He was a high school principal. He was a superintendent in North Smithfield. I didn't know him personally. It was, well before I came on board. But I want to acknowledge his passing because we were contacted by his son, and what he had asked, for the arrangements in lieu of flowers, in lieu of other things at his funeral in the wake, was to make a donation to North Smithfield High School. And so they have donated $200 some odd. And, and they're actually interested in setting up a scholarship fund in Mr. Devine's name. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank the family. And I know Mrs. Mayo has more information.
Oh.
So, if you would tell us about Mr. Devine or.
Well, and I think I'm probably the only one in the school committee who remembers Mr. Devine. And I would just like to say that he was a gentleman. He was very sensitive, very understanding, just plain nice. And he really cared for his students. In fact, one of his students from more than 30 years ago wrote this tribute. And it said, "He was a truly wonderful man, educator, and friend to so many. He made us all better." So I would just like to say thank you to his family, because a scholarship or donations to the high school in his memory would really be a fitting memorial to him for the years that he spent there, and also for the difference he made in the lives of his students.
Very nice. And we've also drafted letters of appreciation that we will be sending out to the family. So it was marvelous. And it's the kind of thing that, despite everything going on in the planning, you get something like this, or just a parent out of the blue saying, hey, you guys are doing a great job. This must be tough. These are the meaningful moments. So it's great.
Madam Clerk, can you send a letter on behalf of the school committee? We haven't done that yet, right? Jean, would you mind maybe adding in, working with Fatima, and just put that language that you just said in a letter from us?
Sure.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Superintendent, you all set?
All set.
Okay, we'll move on to the informational portion. Superintendent resignation and the position of Pat Kalenko as the CTE department chair.
Yep. So you have them. I want to wish Carol, Ms. Green, a good luck. And to be honest, in her situation, she was one of the folks that was on the extended layoff, and we lost her. We found a position elsewhere. So and Mrs. Kalenko, happy to have her back as a department chair. She's been in this position for a very long time. And again, she was another person who was on the extended layoff as we tried to sort out our budget, which turns out never to be sorted. So we had to keep moving and, and just keep the business of the business going. So, I was very happy to call everybody back. Unfortunately, we lost Ms. Green.
That's too bad. Next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 21 operating capital budgets. Lisa, do you have anything to tell us on these?
No, nothing new, just waiting for the announcement of the state aid sometime in September.
Okay. Is there any further business? Does anybody want to make any comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconding. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the meeting. I know a lot of people are on voluntarily, so we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ending the recording.
Have a good night.
Right.